All right, thanks for the reminder there. I meant to turn that on and I forgot. All right, so the agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit, just kind of high level, about what the Student Cluster Competition and the IndySCC is. We'll talk about what's new this year, and then we've got some tips on how to prepare and writing a good team application. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end for any questions that you all have. So yes, we are now recording this session. We'll post these slides and the recording on the SCC page. Probably, we've got another session tomorrow. It's got the wrong date on there. We've got another session tomorrow evening for folks on the other side of the world. So we'll get those posted after that. All right, so quick introductions. Like I said, I'm Dan Dietz. I'm the chair for this year. Just really quickly about myself, I'm an HPC engineer at Oak Ridge National Lab. So I work on our systems acceptance team. So when we bring new systems in, we get to test them out, and then we help support the early access systems for users to, port their codes over to the new architectures and things like that. I am joined by my vice chair, Darshan. I don't know, are you on the call? I don't see him on. That's all right. Oh, no, he is. Darshan, do you want to say hello?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, something wrong with my camera here. I'm Darshan. I'm currently an engineer at Archer Aviation. I was formerly a postdoc at the University of California, San Diego. And yeah, happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks. And then our IndySCC chair, Layla.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name's Layla Freeborn. I'm the Associate Director of User Services at University of Colorado Boulder. And so I kind of set the strategy for our group and making sure that researchers are happy with the services we put out and can, actually interact with the systems in productive ways. My background's in biology, and so it was a very long, winding path for me to get to HPC. But now that I'm here, I love it and really excited to participate in this year's competition.
Awesome. Yeah, and then we've got some of the other folks on the committee listed here. I don't think I see any of them on the call. That's fine. And there's a whole bunch that are far too numerous to list here. One moment. Okay, I don't know why it's asking me to admit everybody. I thought I turned that setting on. Anyway, yeah, so there's a bunch of other awesome people that are on this committee, and so a big thanks to them to helping put this competition or these competitions on. So what is the Student Cluster Competition? Well, as you may know, HPC is one of the best tools in existence for science and engineering, right? There's a lot of simulations and all kind of experiments that we can do, on an HPC system a lot quicker and more cheaply than you can do them in real life, and many other reasons, many other applications for HPC, right? So the SCC, one of its goals is to foster skill development and help make those networking connections, the people connections, to bring in the next generation of HPC experts and professionals. So just really quickly, but the cluster competition boils down to this 48-hour, it's a non-stop contest to build and run a small supercomputer. That's kind of waters it down a little bit, because there's, you'll spend the whole fall, second half of the year preparing for it, right? You'll work with your vendors and your institutions to design and build an HPC cluster, right? So it's really just more than just the 48 hours at the convention. Teams are made up of 6 undergrads. There's some qualifications down there. We'll have the rules linked, but basically it's, the team members need to be undergraduates during the competition and at least 18. So yeah, like I said, you'll compete at the competition, which is held in the convention center. So you're right on the show floor with everything else that's going on. We'll have a benchmarking period where you'll run some real world benchmarks to measure, and you'll do your fine tuning on your cluster. And then you run real world science on your cluster, right? You'll have some data sets to run through, and you'll demonstrate your knowledge of those applications. You'll have to handle real world problems. In the past, we've done scheduled power outages where we schedule them, but we don't tell you when it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to do that this year. But I did leave this bullet point on there because power outages can still happen, right? Last year in Denver, we thought we were going to have a power outage during the middle of all this. The city of Denver, like they had a substation or something in the downtown area that needed maintenance, and they were going to shut it down for an hour, and like half of downtown was going to be without power for like an hour in the middle of the night. That ended up not happening. They rescheduled it, but you know, those are real things that you might have to deal with. And then all of this is within a power budget, so we'll talk about that. And the power budget is just sort of the equalizing factor for all the teams. And then Layla, do you want to talk about the IndySCC?
Sure. So let me turn my camera on. The really nice thing about the IndySCC is that it kind of lowers the bar to entry for teams that maybe are, inexperienced or just kind of getting started as a team. And the main way that we lower the bar to entry is by providing the hardware to the teams. And so rather than having to form connections with vendors and get sponsorships and have all of that ready to go, we provide the hardware for you. This year, we are using Jetstream 2, which is an access resource provider based out of Indiana University. And combinations of teams will compete in many of the same activities that the SCC does in a final 48-hour competition. But one of the kind of nice things about the IndySCC, and what makes it, I think, really accessible to more inexperienced teams, is that there's a huge educational component in the months leading up to the competition. I think there's kind of a big thing that we'll tell you about later that separates this year's IndySCC from previous years, and that there are going to be opportunities for teams to attend in person. And again, we'll tell you more about that later. I think we can advance to the next slide.
All right. Yeah, so I guess that's a little bit about the schedule for the SCC. So like I said, really it's the week at the conference, but then there's also everything leading up to it, all the preparations that you're doing. But to give you an idea of what it looks like once you get to Atlanta, so on Friday and Saturday is when teams arrive. The international teams come in on Friday. They need a little more time for travel and, go through customs, all that stuff, right? So they come in on Friday, and then US teams will come in on Saturday. And then Saturday afternoon is really when things start. There's a couple of safety briefings. We do the SCC safety briefings. That's like we're talking about electrical safety and safety on the show floor. And then once you do that, then you can get access to the show floor and you can start building. There's also the Students at SC orientation. That will also be a mandatory event. You may have some time in between there, or sometimes they, we'll see what the schedule looks like. You may just, go from one orientation to the other. But at any rate, and Saturday afternoon is when you can get into the show floor and start putting your cluster together. And then you've got, I didn't put it on here, but there is a students mixer in the evening. So that'll be another mandatory event for not only the SCC students, but all of the, there's the student volunteer program and what else is there? The HPC immersion program. I think like all of those folks will be there. There'll be a lot of folks from the committee there as well. So that's just that'll be a nice evening of food and games and things. That's Saturday evening. And then Sunday will just be set up. You'll work through and get your cluster set up and get it tested. And then Monday is when things really start. So Monday morning, we'll start benchmarking. And then you've got basically all day until probably like 5 o'clock to do benchmarking to get the best, scores that you can. At that point, then we lock in the configuration. You can't make any more hardware changes after that. And then you'll get a very short break. And then Monday evening is the opening gala for the whole convention or the whole show floor. So everybody will be there. There's, food and drinks there as well. But that's when we start that's when we kick off the final 48 hours. And so not really a whole lot of a ceremony there, but like the conference chair will come and say hello. I think there's usually VIPs from the sponsoring societies, and they'll come and say a few words, and then we'll get started. And so that's when we announce the mystery app, which we'll talk about more here in a bit. And then this is also when you'll get your hands on the data sets and the challenge problems that you'll be working through with those scientific codes. Yeah, and then you work through the night into Tuesday, work through the night again into Wednesday. There'll be judging interviews, so the app experts will come through and talk to you about your knowledge of the scientific applications. So that's usually Wednesday, I think. You'll get a chance to go to all of the other activities within the conference. And then competition ends Wednesday evening. We'll probably end about 5 o'clock. It's not quite 48 hours, but we need time to get our, the committee goes into crunch mode, and we work late into the night to get all of the results graded, because then the results are announced at the award ceremony. So there are 2 official awards that the conference gives out. There's one for the best HPL score, and then there's the overall SCC winner. And then we do, you'll tear down. There's like a wrap-up meeting where you can give us feedback on how everything went, and then you'll head home Friday.
All right. So with the IndySCC, like I mentioned, because of that educational component, it starts way before the conference and that 48-hour final competition. And so around the end of August, beginning of September, we will have the IndySCC teams get on the hardware. They'll actually get access to Jetstream VMs. We'll have an initial orientation. We'll probably send around a poll so that people can vote on kind of regular preferred orientation times. The week of September 9th, we'll start with the first application. I don't know the order in which we'll hold these yet, and so I just put application 1 and 2 here. We'll have an initial webinar that introduces teams to kind of performance considerations with the applications, also give you some insight into the type of science it supports, talk to you about expectations for the homework assignment, basically give you all the information you need in order to run the applications on Jetstream 2, I should say. We'll aim to do application 2 starting the week of September 23rd, so 2 weeks for each application's orientation and homework assignment. The week of October 7th, we'll start the benchmarking application webinar, and this would be kind of an introduction to the benchmarks and things to look out for, how to interpret output, that sort of thing. The week of October 18th, we'll do hero runs where teams will, or probably groups of teams realistically, will have 24 hours to scale across a larger set of nodes or a larger VM. That is usually a pretty fun aspect of the competition. We'll take a few weeks after that for the committee to reset the hardware and reconfigure the resources for the competition. And then November 18th through 20th, which corresponds to the same time that SCC teams will be competing, we'll have the activities associated with the final competition. One thing I want to point out this year is that unlike previous years, that final 48-hour competition is happening at the exact same time as the SCC is competing. And our hope here was to kind of encourage better integration between the 2 competitions. Again, the IndySCC is really meant to be an on-ramp to the SCC. And so hopefully giving kind of more opportunities for teams to see what it would be like to compete in the SCC. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. So we have a video in here as an interview that we did with the teams. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to play this, but once we send these slides out, if you want to take a look at this, you can. So just a little bit about the components of the competition. So, I mentioned some of this already. The benchmarks, you're going to get the highest score. You're looking for the highest score on HPL and ML Perf are our two benchmarks this year. And then for the SCC, we're actually going to add a mystery benchmark. So that'll be something new. We are not doing IO 500 again. We didn't do that last year. We're not going to do that again this year. We're going to drop HBCG and those optional benchmarks this year, and just focus on those two and then the mystery. So I mentioned the applications. Again, you'll get a set of real-world data sets to work through. Maybe you write out a couple of paragraphs on what you did and the performance. And then again, there's the judging interviews from the app experts. We'll talk to you about your knowledge. And then there's also the reproducibility challenge. So this is part of a broader, I don't blank on the word here, but a broader thing at the conference about reproducibility. So there'll be a paper selected from last year's conference, and in that paper there's some artifact that you should be able to reproduce. And so that's the whole idea here, is that you'll get this paper ahead of time. You'll be able to read through it, try to understand it, and then during the competition you'll work to reproduce that artifact. And then you'll write up your findings in a report. And you can, usually what we do here is you'll start writing the report before you get to the conference. And then once you get there and you actually reproduce the artifact, then you just plug those results into your paper, just so you're not doing all that all at once. And then there's the mystery application. So I mentioned that already, but you won't find out what that is until the kickoff. And then you'll kind of have to work on your feet to get that compiled and get it running. We'll do posters again this year. So you'll get those in, I don't remember the dates, but it's like a month or so before the conference, because we'll get those printed on the booth panels in the booth. So we need to get those in ahead of time. Then we might do a lightning talk of some sort. Last year, we kind of did optional ones. If you had something you wanted to talk about, you could do a lightning talk. We might do that again this year. We'll see, though, if we can find space and time to schedule that in. And then the link or the rules are at this link here. It's just the Student Cluster Competition page at the on the main SC24 website. So the benchmark, again, I mentioned this HPL ML Perf, right? HPL is kind of the de facto benchmark in the HPC world. You've probably heard of the top 500 list, where all the world's supercomputers are ranked on it. That's what the benchmark. That's how those are ranked, or using the HPL benchmark. And then ML Perf is AI, so that's kind of the hot topic right now. And then of course the mystery benchmark, which you will find out about later. So our two applications this year, and we are doing these for both the SCC and the IndySCC is the idea here. The data sets may need to be tweaked a little bit from different hardware and whatnot, but same application. So the two applications this year are NAMD, which is a molecular dynamics code. That's a pretty classical HPC program. And then the other one is ICON, which is a weather and climate simulation framework. And so the app experts this year want to do a focus on I/O tuning. So these weather models and climate models can output a lot of data, and so there's a lot of knobs that you can tune on them to control the parallel I/O and things like that. Now I know usually you only bring not bringing big parallel file systems, and that's fine. There's still a lot of tuning you can do, even just with a single SSD or something like that. And again, the reproducibility challenge and the mystery application. Oops, come on, there we go. All right, so what's new this year in the SCC rules? Well, the power rules have changed a little bit. Last year we had, the power rules were 4,000 watts and then 500 watts for networking equipment. This year we're just doing a total cap of 4,500 watts. We will keep the 2,000 watt limit per node. We are getting a donation of new PDUs this year that can do the per node metering. So if you were around last year, you might remember that we said we were going to do a 2,000 watt per node limit, but those PDUs could not do per outlet metering. So we couldn't really do that this year. We should be able to actually enforce that limit. And like I said, there's no extra budget this year for networking. We didn't know if we were going to have these new PDUs when the rules came out earlier in the month, and I don't really think it's necessary to bring a $30,000 switch for 3 nodes. So you can bring networking gear if you want. That's totally fine. I just don't. It's just not a requirement or anything this year. So yeah, like I said, at least 3 nodes, at least 3 compute nodes that can actually run the codes. If you're wanting to bring something that doesn't quite fit this model, let us know. We are always interested to see what kind of interesting architectures you all can come up with. If we can figure out a way to support it and fit it within the rules, we'd love to do that. Also new this year are the new file servers. So we actually used these last year. I don't know if we said that or not, but these servers can allow up to a 25 gig uplink to the server, not to the internet. You don't need 25 gigs to the internet. So what we're going to do this year is each cluster will be basically NATed through this server. And so we're working on acquiring optics and the fiber to be able to connect your clusters to this file server. We don't have those in hand yet, but I don't anticipate it'll be a problem. But we do want you to bring a 1 gig connectivity plan with the 10 and 25 gig being optional. And then in those rules, there's more details on this with the optics and things that we're trying to get. I think it's good to bring the 1 gig because good gigabit Ethernet, you just plug it in and it just works. So you should really want to have that have a plan for that. The fiber and optics can get a little more fiddly. These servers have 4 terabyte drives in them, so we may do some larger sets that can actually exercise the bigger network connections. Now the total input and output for what you'll be working on won't be 4 terabytes. They're same SSD for the operating system, and we'll do some network logging. So I would anticipate maybe 2 to 3 terabytes at most if we do end up going with larger data sets. We are implementing a noise limit this year at 85 decibels. So we're basically going to be measuring with an actual noise measuring meter I got laying around here somewhere. We're basically going to be measuring where you're going to be sitting most of the time. And this is really just for your health and safety. It seems like every year there's one team that brings a really loud cluster. If you were around last year, there was one team that had a really loud cluster, like it was kind of dangerously loud, and that was no fault of their own. They had no idea it was going to be so loud. So we really just want you thinking about this, and so we encourage you to work with your vendors and your partners to look at what the noise specifications are, and are there software controls on the fan speeds and things like that. So if you can get the hardware ahead of time, then it'd be good to test it. If not, definitely work with your vendors to make sure that you're going to be under that limit. And I don't anticipate this will be a big problem. That one really loud cluster last year, we baffled it with a bunch of cardboard, and by the time we did that, we brought it down. I think they were right at 85 decibels, and then everybody else is like well under that. So I don't anticipate that'll be a big problem. We just want you to think about it. And then the other change is that our booths are actually going to get 5 feet deeper. So past years we've had 10 feet by 10 feet booths. This year it'll be 10 by 15. And so I think just getting that extra 5 feet between, putting your cluster at the back and your tables at the front, that'll help too with the noise as well, and just give you a little more room to work. Let's see, I mentioned the mystery benchmark. Again, we're going to continue on with what we did last year and simplifying the competition a bit. Last year, we really cut down on some of the number of extra things that you had to do. So no planned power outage. Again, who knows? We could always have a power outage. We won't do a poster session. There's not going to be a cloud component again this year. Because really, we want you focused on sort of the core activities and then also being able to attend the rest of the conferences. That's like 3/4 of the reason we're bringing you, is so that you can get out and attend the conference and network with people. So last year, if you remember, we did this like capture the flag thing where you had to go around through the different booths throughout the convention center. I think we're going to continue on with that theme, and I know the students program does a scavenger hunt, so we're thinking about maybe making that part of the competition, where you have to, it forces you to go out and go talk to vendors and talk to the people in the show floor. And then other events, I mentioned that the students mixer, there's job fair, and there's a few other events as well that we'll talk about later in the year. So yeah, Layla mentioned the travel opportunities for the IndySCC. This is something we just got approval for as of like a few days ago. So I will say this is still a work in progress. We're working on the logistics of this, but we are looking to bring, we have funding for 2 teams to fully fund their travel to the conference. So right now we're working with our convention center vendor to rework the SCC booth. So if you remember, we had that space on the end where it was like a theater where there was like several rows of chairs and a podium. We're looking at taking that space and then basically just providing a handful of tables with chairs around it for teams to just to huddle around and work. So like I said, we do have funding for 2 teams. For this will include travel, which the SCC does not. For the SCC teams, we do not provide travel. So that's a little bit different. It would also be hotel and the conference registration. So for these opportunities, we're focusing on teams from HSIs, HBCUs, other minority serving institutions, or similar institutions outside the U.S. I know those are U.S.-centric terms, but that's kind of the idea of what we're looking at. Teams that historically are underrepresented, maybe can't afford all the travel and the clusters and all of that. So that's kind of what we're targeting for this funding. And so if you've looked at the team application, there are a couple of questions related to that on there. And then we do anticipate having some space for a limited number of self-funded teams. So we know that some of the teams competing in the IndySCC will be teams that tried to get into the SCC, but didn't make it in or weren't selected. And you have vendors and institutions on board that could potentially fund your travel. So as you're working with your vendors and institutions, this might be something you think about if that's something you're interested in. There is an option on the team application to select that. And then if you are interested in those self-funded team slots, be sure to detail in the section about your vendor relationship, just detailing what support you have. We just want to see that you do have that funding to come. And then just a little disclaimer in there. We really are trying to get these decisions done at the same time as the rest of the notifications. But as I said, this is a work in progress, so there is a chance that may come a little bit later as we're still working out the logistics and setting the exact number of teams. But we'll get this done as quickly as we can. Okay, so just some tips on preparing. So this is, like I said, you're going to be working with your vendors and your institutions to design and build your cluster, right? So you're going to be doing all of that. You need to plan the logistics for getting to the competition, not only shipping your cluster, because you'll be responsible for those costs, but also shipping yourselves to Atlanta. So the SCC provides for the 6 team members and 1 advisor, conference registrations, and then single occupancy hotel rooms. And then those rooms cannot be shared with anybody else, other attendees or other people you might be traveling with. These are really just for just that one person. You don't really have any control over the room, so it's they're often just one single bed anyway. Then, as I said, you are responsible for the costs of traveling, your airline tickets, and shipping of your cluster. So we encourage you to work with your vendor partners on that, get them to pay for that. And then also, we don't provide like a per diem or anything. There is some food available. We provide, so for the overnight periods during the competition, we stock a freezer in the little break room there with some stuff from the frozen section of the grocery store, Hot Pockets and frozen burritos and things like that. There are a few events with lunch and dinner, like that mixer program. I think there's a couple other student events that might have lunch at them. You do get registration for the tech program and the workshops and tutorials, which all have break food in the morning and afternoons. Our college students, I am sure you will have no problem finding free food at this event. But other than that, we don't really provide explicit meals for the SCC. So I just wanted to give you a few tips on filling out your application for the competition. This seems kind of obvious, but be sure to answer all the questions and all of the points, within the prompts. Just make sure those are thoroughly answered. There is a question about SCC or IndySCC. So there are 3 options that you can pick there. One is you're just interested in the SCC. You can say that you're only interested in the IndySCC. Or you can say you're interested in both. And if you say both, we'll consider you for the SCC first. And if you're not selected for that, then we'll put you in the rankings for the IndySCC. There's a question about the strength of teams. You're just going to talk about how you're going to work together as a team to win. So, talking about your different majors is good, but you should make sure that you talk about, how, this major is going to work with this major to solve this problem and, those sorts of things. So we just want to see how you're going to work together and how that gives you an advantage and how you're going to win. There's a question about diversity. So this is not your academic diversity, so don't mention different majors here. This is not what we're asking. We're looking for diversity in other areas, like underrepresented groups in your home region and institution. So this is going to, differ depending on what part of the world you're from, and even within different regions, different institutions will have, this will mean something different. So this could be, gender diversity, racial diversity, LGBTQ, other parts of the world, maybe, socioeconomic diversity is a big thing. I know some areas, religious diversity might be a big important topic. So those are the sort of things that we're looking for here. And then you should talk about tell us what diversity means to you. Like I said, it's different for everybody, so you should talk about what that means for you and your institution. And then also you want to talk about the efforts that you took to recruit a diverse team. So we know that recruiting a diverse team is difficult, especially amongst underrepresented groups, because they are underrepresented and there may not be a lot of folks to recruit from. So especially if your team is not as diverse as you would have liked, you should talk about what efforts that you took to try to make it more diverse. We just want to see that you understand what diversity is all about, and that you took this seriously is really what we're looking for. A few other things. So, hardware and software for the SCC teams. You should go into detail about your hardware. Listing technical specs is good, but you should also tell us, why did you choose those specs and how are those specs going to help you win? Now, answer may be, this is what our vendor is offering. That's fine. But you should talk about, how is this going to help with this application, or how is, we chose these GPUs because of this. Those sorts of things is what we're looking for there. And then, talk about what sort of support you're receiving for your vendor and your institution. So, as far as funding, talk about what kind of funding you're getting. You should talk about, is your vendor or your institution providing any training or, access to, clusters at your institution to practice on. Those sorts of things is what we're looking for there. There's a section on team preparation. So tell us about what your plan is to prepare. Are you meeting every week to practice and talk about things, guest lectures, things like that? If you're taking any courses that might be relevant, you can talk about those, but be sure to tell us why that course is relevant and how that's going to help you prepare. Don't just list a course catalog. I think every year there's a few applications that just list like a bunch of courses, and it's like, okay, well, I know what a computer science program looks like. How is your data structures course going to help you install STORM and install operating systems? So just be sure that if you're taking courses and you're mentioning those, talk about why those are going to help you. And then finally, there's a section on your goals for coming to this competition and to the conference. And so being as specific as possible here really helps. So, yeah, everybody's coming to, attend the conference and network. Try to be more specific than that. Is this, this person wants to be a HPC engineer and wants to attend these sessions and, that sort of things, those sorts of things. What specific things are you going to get out of this competition and get out of the conference? So that will really help you there. Okay, just a little more information. There's some links to the SCC website and the rules, and the IndySCC website and rules. This student cluster competition.us website is sort of the our archive of all of the past competitions. So you can go there and see. There's a ton of pictures if you want to see what it looks like to be there. There's a ton of pictures on there. You can see what teams have competed and what applications have been selected in the past and all that good stuff on there. So that's a really good resource as well. And then some dates. The applications have already opened. As you may have seen, applications will close on May 15th. And then we'll take a month to do all of the reviews and scoring of those applications, and then get those notifications out to you on June 15th. And then things will start from there. So if you have any questions, we can take those now. Otherwise, there's this email address. You're more than welcome to email us later on if you think of things. But other than that, I will open it up for any questions.
Hi, so I was just wondering, obviously we need to detail our hardware approach in the application. How far along does the, I guess, hardware plans need to be? So I'm guessing hardware itself, like we kind of need to know what we're going to be doing, but I'm guessing we don't need to have acquired the hardware, because it's a hard issue where like we can't go to a vendor and say, can we have this hardware for a competition we may not get into? Yeah,
that's a good question. Yeah, and I should have also added too that your hardware planner doesn't need to be finalized. If you just have a general idea of what you're looking for out of the vendor, or the vendor says we think we can provide this, that's fine. I'm trying to think when the deadline. There's a deadline later in the year if you're selected, where you provide your final hardware architecture, and I will say that does change. Vendor plans change, and the hardware you thought was going to be available is not available, or won't be available by the start of the competition and things like that. So that it's not set in stone. You know.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you have a rough ballpark for like how modern is the hardware that teams typically bring to the competition? Is it things released 2 months before the competition starts, or?
It's usually a good mix. There are some teams do bring like stuff that's just being released. Then other teams bring maybe a generation or two older.
Okay, thank you.
Good mix, yeah. And if you are bringing, so I think it's detailed in the team application. But if you're bringing something that's not released but is planned to be released, between now and the competition, we do kind of look to make sure that you have a backup plan, because supply chains and all that stuff, and those deadlines can slip. So if it's something that's not available yet, we do kind of look to see that you have a backup plan too.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I did also have another question actually of obviously it's not ideal, but can team compositions change after the application?
Yes, there will be a cutoff at some point. I want to say usually it's like September, early September. Really, that's just for getting the list of people into the hotel, into the housing folks, and they need to get those the reservations set. In theory, we can allow changes really up until really the competitions begin. I don't really have a problem with that. It becomes more of a matter of the logistics and whether we can actually get you, make those hotel swaps. But certainly, if you're swapping with somebody that's already going to be there, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I guess another question, which
Sure.
yeah, you may not have the stats at hand, but generally, like, I'm guessing you get a lot of applications compared to the number of slots available for the SCC. But like, are most, I guess, serious applications with like strong vendors and all, like, how likely is that to actually go through in the end? Is it usually that like strong applications typically will get through, or are there quite a few which have to be rejected just because there isn't enough space?
Yes, I think, let's see, I mean, we had last year, I think we had 30 some applications. We selected 11 for the SCC and 15 for the IndySCC. I don't remember the good breakdown, but yeah, there are some good solid applications that won't make it into the competition. It's usually that cutoff is very tight. So it can be competitive, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Do you have any further advice for like I guess a new team trying to join? Yeah, I mean, I've been to some of us have been to IndySCCs in the past, so it's kind of trying to break out into the SCC now, but obviously that's a lot more involved, which we're trying to handle the admin and vendor side, but it's also just getting through that application stage is somewhat daunting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I would carefully read, trying to think if we have. I tried to expand some of the text on the application this year to be a little more clear on what we're looking for. So I think really my advice is just carefully read the application prompts. There's a lot of tips on things to address in there, and just making sure that you're fully addressing all of those things. Because I know there's always some every year that just don't quite address the question, and then they lose points on their application. I think that's really kind of my biggest tip, is at least as far as the application goes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Right, any other questions? I will go ahead and stop recording if anybody